This is CBS News Special Report. I'm Carissa Lawson in New York.
In the world of modern warfare, where technology and firepower often dictate the outcome of battles, the clash between traditional military strategies and cutting-edge defense systems can lead to catastrophic consequences. Imagine this. Iran, a country known for its strategic military operations in the Middle East, launches a daring attack on one of the most formidable weapons in the world, an American aircraft carrier. A massive floating fortress capable of projecting military power across oceans, with advanced missile defense systems, radar technology, and a fleet of fighter jets at its disposal. The odds are stacked heavily against Iran, but they decide to challenge it head-on. What happens next? The answer might surprise you. This is not a typical David versus Goliath story. This is the harsh reality of facing a military juggernaut like the United States. In today's video, we will break down what led to Iran's ill-fated attack on a U.S. aircraft carrier, the technology behind the American fleet that made it virtually unstoppable, and how Iran's attempt ended in disaster. But it's not just about the attack. It's about the lessons learned, the costly miscalculations, and the undeniable truth. Old-school tactics don't work against a military that has mastered technology at every turn. What does it take to defeat an aircraft carrier? In theory, a coordinated, high-powered strike could do the job. But what if the enemy can detect you before you even launch the attack? What if they have multiple layers of defense, including systems that can intercept missiles mid-flight? Iran's military might have underestimated the technological gap between their forces and the U.S. Navy. In this video, we'll show you how Iran's ships tried to close the gap, what went wrong during the operation, and the immense cost they paid for their failure. From advanced radar systems to missile defense, the U.S. Navy's technology renders traditional military strategies nearly obsolete. And that's where the story gets fascinating. Iran, with its limited technological capabilities, believed that sheer force and numbers would prevail. But their lack of modern naval warfare strategies and insufficient resources would soon become painfully clear. While the world watched, the reality of modern naval combat unfolded in front of them, and the results were not in Iran's favor. You'll hear first-hand details of the operation, how Iranian ships attempted to close in on the carrier, and why their efforts were thwarted before they even came close to their target. The technological superiority of the United States not only ensured the safety of the aircraft carrier, but also highlighted the massive gap between conventional military forces and the latest in defense technology. In the end, what happened to Iran's fleet after the failed attack? What toll did it take on their military strategy and resources? And perhaps most importantly, what lessons can we learn from this tragic and costly confrontation? Stay tuned as we dive deep into the details of this high-stakes naval operation and uncover the key takeaways from one of the most significant failures in modern military history. This is not just a story of defeat. It's a story of what happens when old tactics meet modern power. In the volatile world of modern geopolitics, military confrontations between nations often stir up tension and speculation. One of the most striking events in recent years unfolded in the Persian Gulf, where Iran, a nation with a long history of military ambition, boldly attempted to strike one of the most powerful symbols of U.S. naval power, an American aircraft carrier. This wasn't just a typical military skirmish. This was a direct challenge to the might of the U.S. Navy, which operates some of the most advanced and formidable warships in the world. At the heart of the incident was the USS Kearney, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier with a displacement of over 100,000 tons, capable of carrying over 60 aircraft, and equipped with some of the most sophisticated radar, missile defense, and electronic warfare systems available. To challenge such a vessel was an audacious move, but Iran, looking to assert its presence in the Gulf, felt the need to make a statement. It all began with escalating tensions between the U.S. and Iran. In the months leading up to the confrontation, the two countries were engaged in a war of words, economic sanctions, and military posturing. Iran, under immense pressure from a series of international sanctions and the U.S. naval presence in the region, sought to project power. The Iranian Navy, although outclassed in terms of technological capabilities, had been making strides in increasing its military capabilities. With a large fleet of smaller, more agile warships, Iran believed it could exploit gaps in American naval defense by launching a surprise attack. They amassed a fleet of smaller, high-speed missile boats, armed with long-range anti-ship missiles, hoping to overwhelm the U.S. carrier with sheer numbers and speed. The Iranian strategy, it seemed, was to use these smaller vessels to surround and harass the American giant, hoping that swarming tactics might create openings for their missiles to penetrate the defenses of the USS Kearney. But the U.S. Navy had long anticipated such tactics. In the Gulf, American aircraft carriers and their accompanying battle groups are the epitome of naval dominance. With state-of-the-art Aegis missile defense systems, radar systems that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously, and electronic warfare systems capable of jamming enemy communications and missile guidance, the U.S. Navy had a technological edge that no fleet of small missile boats could overcome. The Kearney, like all U.S. aircraft carriers, was surrounded by an armada of destroyers and cruisers, each equipped with advanced radar and defense systems designed to intercept missiles long before they could even come close to the carrier. The Iranian plan was simple, yet bold. They launched their attack in the dead of night, using the cover of darkness to close the distance between their missile boats and the American carrier. As the boats sped through the choppy waters of the Gulf, they launched a coordinated salvo of anti-ship missiles, hoping to overwhelm the Kearney's defenses. But the U.S. Navy had been tracking their movements from the moment they left port. The Kearney's advanced radar systems picked up the incoming missile boats long before they were within striking distance. Within seconds, the missile defense systems on board the Kearney engaged. The first wave of missiles was intercepted by the ship's Aegis system, destroying them mid-air. But Iran's fleet wasn't backing down. They launched a second wave of missiles, hoping to break through the defenses with sheer volume. Again, the American systems responded, intercepting most of the missiles, but one managed to slip through, hitting the side of the USS Kearney with a loud explosion. Thankfully, the impact caused minimal damage, and no lives were lost. But it was a stark reminder of how close Iran came to inflicting real harm on one of the most advanced warships in the world. While the damage was minimal, the Iranian fleet was not as fortunate. U.S. destroyers quickly moved into position, launching counterattacks and firing precision-guided missiles at the smaller Iranian ships. Within minutes, several of the Iranian vessels were sunk or severely damaged. The speed and firepower of the American response left little room for the Iranian ships to maneuver. In less than an hour, the attack had been repelled. But the failure came at a significant cost to Iran. Despite the initial surprise of the missile barrage, the lack of coordination and the inability to break through the American defenses spelled disaster for the Iranian Navy. What was supposed to be a moment of strength and defiance turned into a humiliating defeat. Iran lost several vessels in the attack, and the damage to their military morale was palpable. For the Iranian military, the attack on the USS Kearney was a hard lesson in the reality of modern naval warfare. It showed that conventional tactics, no matter how audacious, would not suffice against a technologically superior opponent. Iran's reliance on outdated naval strategies and an overestimation of the effectiveness of its missile boats revealed a dangerous misunderstanding of the true capabilities of the U.S. Navy. The operation, while bold, was ultimately a failure, highlighting the gap between Iran's aging fleet and the cutting-edge technology of the United States. Leading up to the attack on the USS Kearney, Iran's military leadership was well aware of the overwhelming technological superiority of the United States, particularly when it came to naval power. The decision to launch an assault on one of the most formidable American assets, an aircraft carrier, was driven by a mixture of frustration and desperation. For years, Iran had been under the pressure of increasing sanctions, limited access to modern weaponry, and an ever-growing presence of U.S. naval forces in the Persian Gulf. In this context, the attack was seen as an opportunity to send a bold message to both the international community and the United States. Iran would not be intimidated. The Iranian military, although possessing an extensive arsenal of small missile boats and fast attack craft, had long struggled with the problem of technological disparity. The Kearny's defenses alone were far more advanced than anything the Iranian Navy had at its disposal. Iran's naval forces, led by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, had a reputation for asymmetric warfare tactics, relying on speed, surprise, and overwhelming numbers. The IRGC had spent years refining these tactics, using smaller, fast-moving vessels to conduct hit-and-run attacks against larger, more powerful adversaries. Their strategy, though effective against regional enemies, was considered outdated in the face of America's technological superiority. However, Iran's leadership believed that by concentrating a large number of these smaller, fast-attack boats, they could potentially overwhelm the American defenses, even if only for a moment. To achieve this, Iran's navy began a massive buildup of these vessels in the months preceding the attack. They secretly upgraded their fleet of missile boats, some of which were equipped with modified Chinese-made anti-ship missiles, known for their devastating range and power. These boats, typically deployed in swarms, were meant to target the USS Kearny from multiple angles simultaneously. Behind the scenes, Iran's military strategists also sought to deploy advanced electronic warfare tactics. They worked to develop jamming devices capable of interfering with the Kearny's radar and missile defense systems. Iran's leadership had high hopes that, with the help of these new technologies, they could create a window of vulnerability. The idea was to render the American defenses blind to the initial wave of missile attacks, making it easier for the smaller Iranian boats to land a decisive blow. At the same time, the Iranian Navy also relied on a network of underground bunkers and hidden radar stations along the coast of the Persian Gulf to maintain real-time surveillance of American naval movements. These stations were critical in gathering intelligence on the exact location of the USS Kearny and its supporting battle group. As the day of the attack approached, Iran's naval commanders coordinated with ground-based forces and intelligence units to create a multi-layered attack plan. In preparation, they launched a series of deceptive operations designed to confuse and mislead American forces. Iranian vessels conducted mock drills, simulating distress signals and non-aggressive maneuvers in an attempt to divert attention away from their real intentions. Meanwhile, the IRGC oversaw covert operations aimed at positioning missile boats at strategic points in the Gulf, just outside the reach of U.S. naval radar. These boats were equipped with newly acquired Russian-made anti-radar missiles, which they hoped could temporarily blind American systems long enough for the attack to succeed. On the eve of the attack, the Iranian fleet was in place. Iran's leadership was eager to strike, hoping that the sheer audacity of the assault would shake American confidence and send a message to the rest of the world. As the clock ticked down, the Iranian forces, led by their missile boats, prepared to launch a coordinated assault on the USS Kearny. For the first time in years, the Iranian military felt it had the upper hand. The plan was set in motion. Yet the reality of the operation would quickly prove that sheer determination could not overcome the fundamental technological gaps between the two powers. In the final moments of preparation, a crucial error was made. The jamming devices, which had been integrated into several of the smaller boats, were still in their testing phase. The Iranian Navy had hoped to disable American radar systems just long enough for the attack to commence. However, when the jammers were activated, they did not perform as expected. Instead of disrupting the radar systems of the Kearny, they inadvertently alerted the U.S. Navy to the presence of Iranian vessels much earlier than anticipated. The timing of the operation, which had been meticulously planned for months, was compromised. This mistake, although seemingly minor, would prove to be one of the key factors in the failure of the operation. The jamming devices, in essence, became the Iranian Navy's Achilles heel, revealing their positions and allowing the U.S. forces to prepare for the inevitable assault. Despite the setbacks, Iran pressed on with the attack, but it was a battle already lost before it began. The heavy reliance on smaller, outdated tactics and the failure of critical technological elements set the stage for an event that would shake the Iranian military's confidence in the years to come. The moment the Iranian fleet launched their attack, the USS Kearny and its accompanying battle group were already in a heightened state of readiness. The American Navy had long anticipated such a move. In the face of increasingly provocative actions by Iran, the U.S. Navy had been on high alert for months, particularly in the Gulf region. The Kearney's Aegis combat system, one of the most advanced in the world, had been constantly scanning for any threats from both the air and sea. The system, which combines radar, tracking, and defense capabilities, is capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously and launching intercepts with deadly precision. This technological superiority was one of the key factors that made the Kearney virtually untouchable in a conventional naval battle. As the Iranian boats made their move, the American fleet, relying on an intricate web of communication and intelligence, was already 10 steps ahead. The initial phase of the Iranian attack came as a surprise, not because of its timing or aggressiveness, but because of how easily it was detected. The first wave of Iranian missile boats, having launched their attack from a distance, hoped to overwhelm the American defenses with sheer speed and numbers. The Iranian boats, armed with Chinese-made anti-ship missiles, were fast and maneuverable, darting across the waves in a coordinated fashion. Their hope was to launch missiles from different angles, forcing the Kearney to defend from all directions at once. However, the U.S. Navy's radar system was quick to pick up the fast-moving vessels. With the Kearney's advanced systems and those of the destroyers accompanying it, the Iranian boats were spotted long before they could get within range of their target. The Aegis radar system alone was capable of detecting small objects on the surface, and with the Iranian boats' reliance on speed, they were left vulnerable to the U.S. Navy's early warning systems. The minute the missile boats launched their first wave of anti-ship missiles, the U.S. defense system responded in kind. The first barrage of missiles was swiftly intercepted by the Kearney's Aegis system, which destroyed them mid-flight with impressive precision. The Iranian forces had hoped that the initial attack would serve as a distraction, allowing a second, more powerful wave to strike the Kearney. However, the failure of the first wave turned out to be disastrous. The Iranian boats were now well within the targeting range of the U.S. Navy's destroyers, which quickly launched counterattacks. Precision-guided missiles, designed to target and eliminate small enemy vessels, were deployed with remarkable speed. Within minutes, several of the Iranian boats were reduced to burning wrecks, their crews scrambling to escape the inferno. The attack had failed before it even had the chance to truly escalate. What was meant to be a coordinated multi-phase strike turned into a humiliating defeat for the Iranian Navy. Despite their technological investments in jamming devices and missile technology, the Iranian fleet had failed to realize just how far behind they were in terms of modern naval warfare. The sheer scale and sophistication of the U.S. Navy's defense systems had overwhelmed their small fleet. While the Iranian boats were fast and maneuverable, their missiles lacked the precision and effectiveness required to breach the layered defense of the U.S. Navy. The Iranian Navy was stuck in a bygone era, relying on outdated tactics that could not keep up with the cutting-edge capabilities of modern military technology. In this instance, speed alone could not overcome the technological might of the United States. After the initial onslaught, the Iranian fleet attempted to retreat, but the U.S. Navy had already anticipated this move. The smaller Iranian boats, though fast, were no match for the highly advanced U.S. destroyers that gave chase. The Kearney's radar systems were able to track the remaining Iranian vessels, even as they tried to break free from the engagement zone. The American destroyers fired several more precision-guided missiles, quickly sinking the remaining Iranian ships. Within the span of a few hours, the once mighty Iranian fleet had been reduced to ashes. Several boats were destroyed, others severely damaged, and the survivors forced to retreat with little more than their lives. The failure of this attack was not just a loss of ships, but a significant blow to Iran's military morale. The attempted strike on the Kearney was supposed to send a message. Iran was a powerful regional force, not to be ignored. But the outcome instead demonstrated just how vulnerable Iran's naval forces were in the face of modern military technology. The cost of the operation was staggering. Not only had Iran lost several of its prized missile boats, but the resources invested in the mission, from the purchase of advanced missiles to the deployment of specialized jamming devices, had been utterly wasted. Iran's leadership, having committed a significant portion of its military assets to this high-risk operation, was left with a tarnished reputation and a fleet much weaker than before. The loss of these vessels also had far-reaching implications for Iran's future military strategy. The Iranian Navy had relied heavily on its asymmetric tactics, where smaller, faster vessels could take on larger, more powerful opponents. However, the failed attack on the USS Kearney proved that these tactics were increasingly ineffective in modern warfare. The United States had demonstrated that technological superiority could neutralize traditional military strategies. The Iranian fleet, which had once been the cornerstone of its naval power, now appeared outdated and irrelevant in the face of modern defense technology. In the aftermath of the attack, Iran's leadership was forced to confront the reality of their military shortcomings. The failure of the operation led to a reassessment of Iran's naval strategy, as the government looked to rebuild and modernize its fleet. However, the damage had been done. Internationally, Iran was seen as a weakened military power, unable to challenge the might of the United States. The repercussions were felt throughout the region, as other nations took note of Iran's failure and the overwhelming technological superiority of the U.S. Navy. While Iran had hoped to project strength and defiance, the reality was far different. They had only shown how far behind they were in the global arms race. In the end, the attempted attack on the USS Kearney serves as a stark reminder of the changing nature of warfare. Technological advances, from radar systems to missile defense and electronic warfare, have shifted the balance of power in modern conflicts. While traditional strategies still have a place, they are no match for the overwhelming firepower and defense capabilities of a nation like the United States. Iran's military miscalculation would go down as a cautionary tale, a reminder that in the modern age of warfare, technology reigns supreme. The failed attack on the USS Kearney left Iran with valuable, albeit painful, lessons about modern warfare. The attempt to challenge one of the most powerful and technologically advanced military forces in the world highlighted just how crucial technological superiority is in contemporary conflict. Iran, having relied for years on traditional military strategies and asymmetric tactics, was now forced to reckon with the reality that these methods could no longer compete against a force equipped with the latest advancements in radar systems, missile defense, and electronic warfare. In the aftermath of the failed assault, the Iranian leadership found themselves grappling with both immediate military setbacks and longer-term strategic questions. The most immediate lesson for Iran was the massive gap in technological capabilities between their forces and the United States. While Iran had invested heavily in smaller, fast-moving attack boats and missile systems, these were no match for the layered defense systems of the U.S. Navy. The failure of their missile boats to penetrate the Kearney's defenses exposed the inadequacy of Iran's naval arsenal when faced with high-tech countermeasures. The Iranian leadership, realizing that their traditional tactics of overwhelming an opponent through numbers and speed were no longer viable against modern systems, began to reassess their entire naval strategy. The key takeaway here was that modern naval warfare is not about size and speed alone, but about the ability to use technology to anticipate, intercept, and neutralize threats before they even materialize. For Iran, this was a sobering realization. In the age of high-tech warfare, relying on outdated tactics was a fatal misstep. One of the more significant lessons for Iran was the need to modernize their military technologies, particularly in the realm of missile defense and electronic warfare. The attack had demonstrated the Iranian Navy's lack of advanced radar systems, jamming devices, and missile interception technologies. While they had made strides in developing asymmetric tactics, it became clear that these methods would no longer be sufficient when facing a well-coordinated and highly advanced military force. Iran's inability to blind the Kearney's radar or disrupt its communication systems exposed how vulnerable they were to more advanced technologies. To remain a viable military power in the region, Iran needed to drastically invest in updating its technology. something that would require significant financial resources and time. Two things Iran lacked given the ongoing international sanctions. Another critical takeaway for Iran was the realization that technology alone doesn't win wars. Strategy is just as important. The Iranian Navy's failure was not just about the inadequacy of its weapons, but also about the miscalculation in their approach.